How are you? Welcome in to the StreamYard presentation tonight, where we're going to talk about 5 EKG hacks. So I'm so glad you're able to find me. We are doing this a different way tonight. We're doing it via a new platform. So in case you've never associated with StreamYard before, it does actually take you to the event, unlike Zoom. So I'm testing this out. So let me know what you guys think about this so I can totally use it for the 5-day or not. But welcome in, you guys. I wanted to also tell you a funny story, as some people are probably logging on with us right now. Hello, how's it going, guys? So, funny story. This was supposed to be at 3 o'clock p.m. today, PST. So I was all set and ready to go. And it was about 9:15 this morning. And I got a text message. You've probably had this happen before, where work says, hey, where are you? You know about your clinic today, right? Now, I don't normally work Thursdays. This was actually an added-on day a long time ago. I forgot, my bad. And so I was like, I'll be there in a minute. So fastest shower in the universe ever. Ran to work, had an amazing day, but that's why we pushed back the event tonight. So I'm totally sorry, I apologize, but we're still here together, and I'm super excited to share with you 5 EKG hacks that we're going to be able to start using as of tomorrow. So in case I haven't met you, my name is Jen Carlquist. I'm a PA, and I'm also a former paramedic, and I work both in the ER and in cardiology. And I'm so excited today because I've been packing up some wonderful pearls for you, and we're going to go through some actual EKGs, and we're going to keep it very succinct and to the point so we can actually get on with our day. So in case you didn't know, also, when I was a paramedic, I think I've told you this story before, but in case I haven't, I just wanted to share with you that I once rode the struggle bus. And when I mean rode the struggle bus, what I mean by that is I once also struggled with EKGs. And it was sort of an interesting moment today because as I was prepping for thinking in my mind about what do I want to share with you tonight, it made me reflect on my journey on how I got to where I am today. And I remember those days of sitting in class, being terrified of being called on, and really just feeling ill prepared, right? And just feeling terrified if the radio went off because I would have to figure out what was going on. And so I recently reached way back, right, into the vault a long time ago and thought back to just remembering what it felt like to feel stuck and remembering what it felt like to just feel paralyzed by that fear and feel like an imposter. And so tonight's goal is to give you guys some tools. Hey, Samantha. Hi, Lori. What's up, Cheryl? Oh my gosh, Carl, Samantha, you're all here. Welcome in. Okay, so just to let you know, I have been there if you're also feeling like you're struggling, okay? So who is this good for? This is good for anyone who reads EKGs, whether you're a nurse, EKG tech, physician, nurse practitioner, PA, right? Anybody this is good for, even MDs, right? And what is also interesting is we have a couple members who have been rocking with us a long time, and one of them is an EKG tech. And I have to tell you that she's one of our smartest of the bunch in our group. And so it doesn't really matter where you are in the scheme of things on the medical team. We all need to know EKGs. And it doesn't really matter where you are on how good you are. It just matters how much you invest into it to learn. And she actually spends a lot of time learning about it, right? And so she catches things, which is so cool. She catches things that a lot of her docs miss. And she'll say, hey, did you catch this Wellens? Did you catch this Brugadas? And like, so she's out there saving lives. She's an EKG tech and she's saving lives. So I love that. So just to kind of reflect back again, why we're spending some time together tonight is that we all graduated. Hi, Carl. And we all graduated and we set out to save the world. And, what's valuable about this is that when we think about the struggle and the hard time that we actually have to spend putting into EKGs, it's worth it because when you really, dive deep, you remember that we're doing this for our patient. And that makes it all worth it because our patients trust us to know these things. And that's why it's also worth it to spend our precious time doing it. So, what are you going to get today? We're going to talk a little bit about a fear that a lot of you have relayed to me. Hey, Jen, I really want to know, when do I need to worry about the EKG? Okay, we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about how to use the intervals as tools. We're going to talk about spotting some dangerous T waves and a whole lot more. Oh, hey, Freddie, what's going on? So grab a pen, #live. Hi, Kathleen. So grab a pen and get ready to take a few notes because what I'm going to share with you is going to be very valuable. Now, if you are watching live, put #live. If you're watching the replay, put #replay. Of course, this is recorded, so if you're in the East Coast and you have to go to sleep, you can watch this tomorrow, no problem. It's not going anywhere, it's going to stay up, and you'll be able to watch it later in case it's late. Okay, so fact number one I wanted to share with you is that the scary thing is that 6 to 42% of the time, the software is wrong. Why does that matter? Okay, why does that matter to us? Because if you, like me, once thought, oh, well, EKG machine software's got to be smarter than I am because it's a machine, right? It's actually not going to save you. It's not going to keep you safe. And so if you rely on that as your sole interpretation, it could lead you astray. I've seen brugadas be called normal. I've seen normals not be called normal. I've seen all sorts of things. STEMIs, not STEMIs. We're going to talk about a STEMI mimic tonight, by the way. And so these are really things that are scary, right? This is scary because then who do you have to trust to read your EKG appropriately, right? That's why you need to rely on you. And so what is the cost of missing something? We think about this and, if you really have ever received a deposition in the mail and you have been terrified, right? If you've ever had to be on a deposition and you see your notes plastered like 10 feet by 10 feet and some attorney pointing to all your possible errors, right? Or maybe there's typo and, credibility is, at stake with that. What's the cost of missing something? The cost could be our license. The cost could be a patient's life. And those two things alone are priceless, right? So there's big cost, there's big stress in missing something. So it's definitely, like I said, worth your time tonight. Now, can you see the problem here of we're kind of set up from the get-go to fail. And I don't mean any harm to any school I ever went to or any school that you're in or have gone to. It's just that honestly, no school could ever give us enough training on this. Why is that? It's because there's so many layers of things to learn. It takes practice also, and it takes guided practice. And a lot of times we don't have the guided practice. So my advice to you is find a mentor. Find someone that you can actually bounce EKGs off of. And one thing I used to do when I worked in the ER, when I was very early on learning this, is I would make my own interpretation. And I would look to see how the cardiologist overread it and then compare my answers. And that's a good way to practice too if you work in a hospital setting. If not, find a mentor and be like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Are you seeing this too? And if not, what are you seeing? And hopefully you have someone you can lean on, right? And of course, you always have this group as well. We're kind of all hanging out, ready to be your mentors as well. Hi, Lynn, Pamela, how are you doing? Hi, Kelly. Nice to see you guys. So the problem is we were set up to fail because we didn't get enough training, because there can't be enough, right? It's an ongoing thing. We also have a high pressure for time, right? We have quick turnaround visits. We have a lot of patients that need to be seen. We don't have a lot of time to sit and marinate on what's happening. So we have to be prepared when we go in. But then there's this whole disconnect of, you have the EKG, but you don't really have that other person to like say, oh, you got this wrong, or hey, maybe next time you want to add this onto your differentials, right? So we don't always have that because our supervising docs or collaborating docs are busy. And maybe you work alone and you don't have a collaborating doc. So there's a lot of reasons that we're set up to fail. So it does take some effort on our part to get good at this. And it also takes time. So common misconceptions, right? We talked about the EKG software, but also there's a common misconception among providers everywhere that I know the big stuff, so I'm good. The reality is that we are not good if we know the big stuff, because not everything that's bad comes in a STEMI package that's beautiful and easy to recognize. A lot of the worst things that scare me are in the non-specific ST wave range. And if you've rocked with me for a while, you know that. You know how I feel about that. But there's a lot of really bad things that the machine won't even call that we need to know. So we're going to cover a couple of those tonight. And why is EKG high risk? Because here's the thing. So I was working with a student recently, and she said to me, well, when we talked about syncope, and I said, hey, what are some high risk things you need to ask a syncopal patient? She's like, well, they would tell me if there's something high risk. And I was like, well, no, not always. Patients don't always know the right things to say, so we need to ask them. And that's never going to hold up in a court of law if you say, oh, well, the patient didn't tell me. Did you ask? Is the right question, right? And so we have to be proactive about this. And step number one, hack number one I'm going to share with you today is that we're going to redo the learning about our intervals. Because here's the thing. I know I was taught this, maybe you were too, that the intervals, those numbers on the EKG, were not important. But it turns out they are. There's a lot of clues in those intervals that can help us. And one of those clues is about Wolff-Parkinson's White. One of those clues is in the QT interval. And one of those clues is actually in the width of the QRS. Those things are all helpful. And there's also clues in the axis. Okay, so we need to know what those numbers are to know what to do about them. So first things first, hack number one is know what normal is. For example, know your normal intervals, know what normal voltage looks like, and know that your EKG, your waves, your P, Q, R, S, T are like a family. They should all be marching along the EKG together holding hands. And then also knowing about the T waves, that all the T waves should be upright in all the leads except for AVR and V1. Those should be inverted. Every other T wave should be upright. And that's knowing what normal is half the battle, because then you can pick up the abnormal things. So these are the numbers that I think are so priceless. And these are the intervals. So what I did was I listed here for you guys the normals so you could write those down. And I'm going to go through these with you really quick so you understand what you're looking at. Number one is ventricular rate. And we should know that the normal heart rate is between 60 and 100. This is 84, therefore it is normal. If it's slower, right, then we're possibly going to be concerned. Of course, looking at the patient, looking at the EKG, right? And then if it's over 100, we're concerned. PR interval, if it's less than 120 or over 200, we're concerned. Over 200, that's when we're usually looking at a first degree block. And under 120, somebody type in the chat for me, what would you think about if the PR interval is under 120? Okay, that's the time it takes from the beginning of the P to the R, okay? And that number is what we're measuring there. It should be between 120 and 200. If it's under 120, what we need to be concerned about is Wolff-Parkinson's White. We need to go in hunting for those delta waves and look at those very closely. If you don't know what delta waves are, or you don't know what Wolff-Parkinson's White is, it's something that causes palpitations. And if you want a refresher on it, we're going to be covering it in our 5-day challenge that we do in this group as well, the 5-day EKG group. We're going to be covering it July 5th again live, so make sure to join us for that. But always thinking about Wolff-Parkinson's White. Yes, Cheryl got it right. Nice. Okay, so that's a clue. Clue number one. If it's short, look for the Wolff-Parkinson's White. Look for the delta wave. The next one down is the QRS duration. That's how wide the QRS is. If it's under 120 or 3 small boxes, that's normal. Over 120 is not normal. When you have over 120, you're looking at possibly a left bundle. You're looking at possibly a Wolff-Parkinson's White. You could also be looking at a hyperkalemia. You could also be looking at a TCA overdose, tricyclics. So there's lots of different things that can have wide QRSs. So bundle branch blocks, for example, there's lots of things, but we have to know exactly what we're looking at before we can diagnose the problem. And then secondly, we should always know the QT interval. This is a hot topic. We know about QT. We know it can lead to torsades de pointe, so we never want to miss it. How are we going to catch it? Well, we're going to look for this number here. Now, let me just clarify something. The QTC right here is the corrected QT interval, and it should be under 460. If it is over that, that's when we start to get a little more concerned. And then when we're in the 500 range, that's when we normally see what's the dangerous thing associated with this, which is torsades de pointe, okay? So again, we're looking for under 460, and the QTC, the second number, is the one we care about. The other one we don't care about. And then there's 3 numbers down here. The middle one is the axis, and that is 51, and it should be between 0 and 90. The axis can be helpful for you when you're dealing with somebody with a pulmonary embolus. They can sometimes have rightward axis, and it also helps you distinguish if you have a VTAC versus an SVT with a Barron-C. So if you have a wide QRS, then, and it's fast, then the axis is the thing that might point you in the direction of what's actually going on. Okay, so this was a fun EKG that I like to show because this was a time when I was working in an ER and I was known as the QT hunter. I was always bugging the EKG techs. I was like, hey, any good ones today? Any good ones today? And I was working during my shift, and this one I was working with, he said, oh my gosh, I have this good one for you. Let me show it to you. So he brought it over, and he was like, look at this. And the QT, if you go over here, QTC is 713. I was jumping for joy. I was like, this is so amazing. Thank you. We were doing like happy dance, eating chips like it was that good of a day when you eat chips. And we were celebrating. But then I stopped because I was like, wait a second, something isn't right. The something that isn't right is there was a bunch of artifact on the channel. A bunch of artifact means that we cannot use this number. So that's actually probably hack number 1.5. If you have a QT that's long, make sure there's no artifact on the channel, because if there is, it's going to be wrong and calculate it wrong. And as soon as we repeated it, it actually came back normal. Now, what could we have done to kind of see if this was right? Where there's a little rule, maybe this is hack 1.75. If you look here at the R to R interval, if you look for the T wave, which is right here, if it was at least halfway between the R and R, that's 500. So this wasn't yet there. So this wasn't a prolonged QT. And so I was clearly disappointed. And we repeated the EKG with no artifact, and you could see it's 444. When you can see, if you look at the T wave, it's all beautiful here. And it's definitely not halfway between the R and R. So that's just kind of an eyeball thing. It's a pattern recognition thing. And it will save you when you think you have a prolonged QT from getting egg on your face like I almost did. So that's a good one. Okay, so step number 2 is when to worry about the EKG. Okay, so why don't you guys take a look at this EKG and tell me what you think. Okay, so type in the chat what you guys think about this EKG. So right away, there's a couple things that are happening. First of all, the machine is saying we have an incomplete right bundle branch block. It's also saying it's an abnormal ECG. And if you just do a quick scan on the intervals, right, you can see that the PR is over 200, right? So that's most likely a first degree block. You'd have to go in and measure it. A QRS duration, it's a little wider than we'd like, but not yet 120, so still within range. The QTC is not too long, which is good, and we can eyeball that and look at the T wave here, right? And you can see halfway between. So QT interval is rate related. Yes, that is exactly why we look at the QTC, Christine. I like your suggestion. So going back over here, let's just talk about what Christine said. This QT here, we don't use it because it's not corrected for rate, and that's the first number. That's why we always use the QTC, which is the second number. So good point, Christine. So looking at this EKG, you can see there's an abnormality here. And if you look closely, you can see that there's a significant amount of ST elevation in V1 and V2. So does anybody know what's happening here? Is this a STEMI? Because, if you have ST elevation, we always have to worry about STEMI. But is this a STEMI? So looking at this, is there any other abnormalities anywhere on the EKG that are, indicative of a STEMI? No. But there's isolated ST elevation in V1 and V2. And it looks like a serious ski slope, right? And so this is none other than a Brugada's patient. Brugada's is a life-threatening disease, okay? It can kill our young folks. It's a channelopathy. And we talk about this again in the 5-day EKG challenge, so I hope you join us then, July 5th. But also, this is a life-threatening thing that the machine didn't catch. So remember that 6 to 42% thing. Yeah, it's not catching it. It's not correct. And so if we just rely on the machine, we could be like, oh yeah, you're fine, go ahead and go home, right? But they're not fine. They actually are at high risk for sudden cardiac arrest, and the machine missed it, so we cannot miss it. We have to pick it up. So one thing I always say is look in V1 and V2 and make sure on every EKG, you just do a quick screen for this. It's something that's mostly found in our teenage population or young athlete, or not athletes, but young people, because usually patients with Brugada's do not live that long. They usually have a cardiac arrest because it's very, very dangerous, right? Now, I'm not going to deep dive on this too much, but just knowing that your machine can be wrong and knowing you always need to look for this. Hack number 2.5, yeah, 2.5, is that if your machine ever says incomplete right bundle, you always want to go in and look for this because it could possibly be a Brugadas if there's an incomplete right bundle. Okay, this is another great case where there was something really, really, really wrong and the machine didn't catch it. So yes, the last EKG didn't catch it. This is another one too where the machine didn't catch what's going on. So does anybody see what is happening here on this EKG and why 10 minutes after this EKG was taken that he was called a STEMI and taken to the cath lab? Does anybody see the findings here? So hopefully, at the very least, you noticed, at the very least, there's lots of things going on. But one of the big things I want to point out to you is that when you talk about T waves, which we will get to in a second, the T waves should always be either one direction or another, always upright or inverted. And this T wave here in V4 is what's called biphasic. Anytime you have a biphasic T wave where it goes up and down, that's something that is always, there's very few always, but always concerning for ischemia. Okay, you should think hard and fast about this. And also Samantha correctly pointed out there's T-wave inversions as well. I like that, Samantha, that you're concerned about that. And yeah, so this was somebody with ischemia, and that's a good call, and that's why they were sent to the cath lab. They actually had multivessel disease. And Christine says, looks like type 1 Brugada. Yes, the last EKG was a Brugadas. Strong work, Christine. You are all over it. So just a little take home that the machine, again, will not save you. That's why you have to know the subtle findings and you have to know these little details and don't rely on the machine to pick up the big stuff. This was a STEMI 10 minutes later. Okay. Also, don't ignore the voltage. Okay. So the number that is the voltage, actually it's not a number, but it's a calculation. Don't ignore the voltage, meaning that when you have a very large R wave or a very small R wave, do not pass go or collect 200 until you figure out what's going on, or at least think about certain things. So especially with low voltage. Now, if you have high voltage, you always need to think about LVH. You also need to think about cardiomyopathy. Those are the big ones. But if you have low voltage, there's other things you need to worry about that are dangerous. Okay, so one of the big reasons of small R waves, that's the most common thing, is that patients have either large chest tissue, lots of breast tissue, or maybe they're overweight or obese, or they have COPD. Those are non-threatening things, right, that can cause low voltage. But the thing we need to worry about the most is the worst thing, and make sure it's not the worst thing before we go on to other things. So this is an actual real case of a 45-year-old female who had dyspnea with exertion for 1 month. So she presented multiple times to facilities and was written off. Okay. She said, I used to ride a bicycle at higher speeds. I now just get short of breath walking across the hall. That's a red flag, right? And labs are obtained. Nothing alarming going on there. Not anemic. We always think about anemia, right? We always think about thyroid. Not an issue. And then she had a calcium score, which was 0 4 years ago. So that kind of takes us down a couple notches in really worrying about ischemia. So it's probably not ACS, it's probably something else. So of course we're going to do an EKG, which is pictured here. So the machine will fairly regularly call out for you low voltage, which is helpful. And it's actually happening here. So you can see these R waves are very small, right? Small, small, small. And here it's almost like flat. And so almost flat. One thing I wanted to show you with the family analogy is normal. You'll have P, QRS, T walking along the EKG together. But the dad should be the biggest wave, okay? As you can see here, like the mom is bigger than the dad, the baby is as big as the mom, like nothing good is happening here. And that's because the voltage is so low here. It's also really low here, also really low here. I will tell you that yes, ischemia can cause this, so can old MI cause this. But the worst case scenario is that she actually had something else. So what else can you think of that would actually, oh, I like it, Christine. You are on the ball, girl. So you need to get an echo. like she said, but you need to make sure there's nothing in the way. So Christine said we would need a 2D echo to rule out cardiomyopathy, which is a very good idea. But the echo would also be looking for one other thing that could also be potentially very dangerous. Does anybody know what that is? So while you're thinking about it, we're going to get that echo that Christine wanted. And here it is. So Christine, what do you think of your echo? This is actually, oh, Samantha, hypertrophy and heart failure. That's something to think about. But usually, and this is a blanket statement, usually hypertrophy and heart failure will cause big R waves. The smaller R waves are usually something in the way. So this is actually a side view of the heart, and I'll just point out the chambers for you. This is the left ventricle, left atrium, right ventricle, right atrium. And this is the pericardium right here. And PE, oh, also a good one. Theravada, yes, I also like that you're thinking about PE. But on this situation, PE would be considered, absolutely. But what is actually happening here? What is this black stuff? And why is the pericardium so white? What is going on there? Does anybody have any clues on what could be happening there? So this is actually fluid. Okay, so this is fluid. And so yes, we would worry about HOCM, absolutely. But usually they would have high voltage with HOCM. But this patient had low voltage. So the worst thing that we would see would be this. And this was actually a pericardial effusion. And Samantha's saying itis. I think you mean pericarditis. And you are right. That is why it is white, pericarditis. And there is a bunch of fluid, which is represented by the black here, that's not supposed to be there. And the fluid is actually collapsing the right ventricle, and it actually buckled the right atrium as well. Yes, Kathleen, you're right. It's a pericardial effusion. And this patient was borderline tamponade. Borderline. Now, let's just go back really quick, because if you had tamponade, what you would look for would be a rhythm strip at the bottom, which we don't actually have. I don't have a 4-chamber, unfortunately. I know, Christine, I know. I only had the one view for you. But and Christine, are you an echo tech? Because I would love to know what you do. So if you look over here, yeah, and she did have atrial collapse that was mentioned on the report. But yeah, totally, Christine. So you would need a rhythm strip, and you would look for the electrical alternans, which would be big beat, small beat, big beat, small beat, and she doesn't have that. That's usually what you see right before someone codes, but we're always thinking about it. She was close. And so what does she need? She needs urgent getting the fluid out of there. So there was consideration for a pericardial centesis. There was consideration of a pericardial window, and they did not feel confident that they could do a pericardiocentesis. And so they actually did a window on her, and she's doing fine now, but luckily she didn't die while someone was trying to figure out what was wrong with her. So, oh good, you practiced in cardiology for decades. Well, I'm so glad you're here, Christine. This is awesome. Okay, so yeah, this patient needed a window to get that fluid out, and this was the take home, that don't ignore the low voltage. Don't just assume it is from large chest tissue or being overweight, okay? Don't assume it's from COPD until you make sure it's not, especially if they're symptomatic. And this was the report where you could see that, there was definitely some diastolic collapse, as does the free wall. So this was someone who was very, very sick, okay? So this is another chest x-ray I wanted to show you. This was not associated with that patient, but this was a really interesting finding that we should also not miss. So this was actually taken 2 minutes before they had cardiac arrest, and this was taken prior. So what is the difference? Well, the heart is wider, okay? The heart is bigger here, and there's also some new cabbage wires that weren't there. So the patient had recent instrumentation of the heart and cabbage, and then they had a pericardial effusion that turned into tamponade. So if you see an EKG or an x-ray like that, that's really, really, really significant. Should mention how to tell difference in pleural versus pericardial effusion. Yeah, maybe you could tell us about that, Christine. Bring it on, girl. Help us out, sister. So can you see the power in knowing the findings, right? Can you see the power in this? It makes you feel confident knowing that if you know these high-risk things, then you can pick them up too. Okay. Step 4, hack 4, is know your mimics. There's a lot of STEMI mimics, but we're going to cover one of them tonight, okay? Just to give you a little primer because we don't want to overwhelm you, but this is one of the STEMI mimics, okay? So this is an EKG that was called a STEMI. Does anybody want to say or take a guess on what's actually going on here? No, this is not a STEMI, okay? This is not a STEMI, but we must be in the wrong chat. No, you're in the right chat, T Cook. I didn't see your comment. I'm going back and forth. Pericardial effusion. Yep, you are right. You are absolutely right, T Cook. Pericarditis, T Cook. I'm sorry, I wasn't seeing your comments, but you got them all right. Look at you. I'm looking back. Okay. So going on to the EKG. So T Cook, if you want to bring it out and guess on this one, we'd love to hear what you have to say. Who else is commenting? The DCU 812, we'd love to hear what you have to say. Sarah Saunders says effusion, nice. So looking at this EKG, I want to hear some thoughts. Okay, benign early repull. Okay, so that is one possibility, T Cook. And Taravasa says pericarditis. So let me talk about that, T Cook. There is, really quickly, if this was benign early repull, I definitely see why you thought that. They had the notching of the J point. Let me just go back over here. They have the notching of the J point, right? They have widespread ST elevation. But the thing that differentiates this between pericarditis and benign early repull, because you guys all have good guesses, okay, is that there's two things that help you sort it out. So Samantha says pericarditis, awesome. Christine says find aorta on peristernal view. Nice, thank you so much. We'll have to talk later, Christine, for sure. So what actually differentiates this is the Spodix sign and the knuckle sign. Okay, so Spodix and knuckle that do point us away from benign early repull into the pericarditis world. So what is the Spodix and what is the knuckle sign? So, and there's one more thing also, and that's the PR segment depression. Okay, PR segment depression. Yes, knuckle sign Taravasa. So let's talk about that first. So up here in AVR, if you were to take your knuckle and push it up under AVR, under the PR segment, it looks like the knuckle is pushing it up. That's called the knuckle sign, okay? And then the opposite of that, or the reciprocal change, is found in lead 2, where you have PR segment depression. And PR segment depression is something that you'll also find not in BER, but in pericarditis. So that's another way to help sort it out, because they're really hard to tell apart. So the last thing that I'll point out to you is that you also have what's called Spodix sign. So if you look at the very end of AVF, and you go, if you go to the end of the T wave, to the beginning of the P wave, there's sort of a stair-stepping effect, okay, where it goes a little bit down, the ST segment slopes down, and that is called the Spodix sign. And all of those things combined together make this a pericarditis. Why was this not a STEMI? It's not a STEMI because there's no reciprocal changes, okay? So you have widespread elevation, no reciprocal changes. You also have the knuckle, the Spodix, and the PR segment depression. So again, just to take home that it really is worth it to make sure that you look at all the things. But benign early repull is not unreasonable, but benign early repull is really not terrible, and pericarditis is worse than BER. So it is important to kind of get a take home on both of those. So I just kind of drew it out for you guys here a little bit easier to see, that you could see the PR segment depression here. You could see there's widespread ST elevation. One of the take homes I wanted to share with you as well is, if you don't already do this, please think about it. Actually take your little ST or your little ruler, whatever you have. I take a paper if I don't have anything. I take whatever I have, or a badge or an arc count window, and I line it up to the very baseline of the EKG, because I always want to make sure I pick up very subtle ST elevation or depression. And this patient has widespread elevation with no depression. Here's the knuckle, okay? And the Spodix is right here, the down sloping of the ST segment. So this is not a STEMI. And then finally, we need to know our T-wave bad guys, okay? What are our T-wave bad guys? They are basically the T-waves that we don't want to miss. Okay, so there's a lot of them. There's hyperacute T-waves, which are really, really big babies, bigger than the QRS complexes. Biphasic, which is up and down. We have inverted T waves, like I just demonstrated here. There's a big T wave inversion. We also have symmetric T waves. Those are not good. And we have something called de-winters. So that's just a small listing of all the T wave bad guys. But I thought what we would do for our hack number 5 is go through a few of them and name them, okay? So hack number 5 is all about our T waves. So first things first, we have to see that the first T wave demonstrated here is actually a normal T wave. How do we know? It's upright, which is good, and also it leans a little bit to the side, okay? Then the next T wave, what do you guys think about that? Now, I think T-Cook, oh yeah, no problem, T-Cook. T-Cook, the second one that's listed here, is definitely, you couldn't tell what this is just based on having the T wave, right? Because it could be benign early repole, or it could be pericarditis. Hard to know. But we don't have a notching in the J point, so that leads us more to possibly a pericarditis. We don't really have PR segment depression, so we'd have to have the 12 lead to really take a look at that. But a little bit of lifting off the baseline is either benign repole or pericarditis, okay? And then the third one over, this one is another T-wave bad guy. And this is actually a lot of times thrown into the STEMI jail, or not STEMI jail, but ACS jail, but he doesn't actually belong there because that's a T-wave that's associated with a big QRS complex or LVH. So when you have a big ventricle, your T wave will repolarize, your ST segment will be abnormal, and you'll repolarize a little differently, and you'll create a reverse check mark, which is what's demonstrated there, and that is the finding associated with LV strain or a big ventricle, not ischemia. So you can see how easily, right, it's upside down, it'd be thrown into the jail, but it's not symmetric, and that's the take home, okay? So hopefully, T-Cook, you got some benefit from that. And then there's two more, okay, that are kind of bad. This one would be a very big pointy T wave that looked like it would hurt your butt if you sat on it. And its mirror image, or the opposite of, a very small T wave, okay? So a big pointy one, hyper K, a very small flat one is hypo K. Okay, so that's just some of the big bad T waves, but the T wave, as you can see, is really where the money's at, okay? Because that can tell you a lot of really good information. So, which one of these are you most excited to start using tomorrow? Let's just recap what we've learned so far. We learned that our intervals are very important. We learned that we could tell if there's a delta wave, right? If there's a short PR. We learned about the QT. If it's very long, we have to worry about torsades. And we know we're going to base our medication decisions off of that, right? We learned that we should always worry about the voltage, if it's very big or very small. We know that we should very much worry about our T waves, which direction they are. We don't like wishy-washy T waves, which go up and down. And we definitely don't like patients that have STEMI mimics, because those are hard. And there's a lot of STEMI mimics. But hopefully you gain some traction and you gain some confidence tonight. And so you feel comfortable, a little more comfortable, kind of like being armed with a few tactics you can take home and use tomorrow. So the bad news is there's still like a lot more I want to teach you. There's actually a ton more. And we're going to cover a little bit of it in the 5-day challenge that is coming up on July 5th. That is free in the 5-day EKG challenge group if you are in it. But there's a lot of other things that we don't cover, right? We don't cover all the bad T waves. We don't cover the STEMI mimics. We don't cover what the coronary arteries feed. We don't cover contiguous changes or reciprocal leads, right? So all that stuff is actually covered in a separate course, okay? So we cover when the machine says it's normal, but it's not. We cover flutter, atrial flutter that you think is sinus tach, but actually is not. We cover all these things. And so Kathleen says she's excited about QRS voltage. I like that. We also talk about, there's 4 things that we talk about that are very dangerous when the machine says non-specific ST T-wave changes. There's 4 things. And we cover that in a different course. So if you feel like you're climbing uphill trying to learn all this and like looking for all the information, watching YouTube videos, watching here, watching there, reading books, we actually condense it all for you in one on-demand course. It's really easy. So the good news is if you're trying to learn that and you're struggling, you have me. I'm in your corner now, which is good. So you don't have to walk uphill alone anymore, because I will be with you if you choose to join me. Now, the good thing is that we put together, Michelle, Barkley, and I, we put together an EKG workshop. where it's all professionally recorded. And we're actually going to do part of it live for you on June 13th. And it's going to be live on Zoom, part of it if you want to join us. But if not, you can just join us for the on-demand part that's all recorded. There's basic rhythms. There's a basic 12-lead workshop. There's a hands-on EKG workshop. And right now, through the weekend, it's on sale actually for half off. It's usually $127, and it's only $68.50 if you join us through the end of the weekend. You also get access to our Launchpad group, which is a Facebook group where we do teachings live every Monday. You get a 1-month access to that where you can actually interact with us live, be on Zoom with us and hang out and chat, and we can actually do things together. So that's kind of fun. So cool. All right, let's see, what else do we have? So I think that was it. Yeah, actually that's it for our evening. So if you guys have any questions, let me know, put them in the chat. I'll put a link for you guys so you can join us, but it's at conqueringcardiology.com if you want to join us. But we'd love to have you. If you do not decide to join us, we will be live again in this group for the 5-day EKG challenge that starts again on July 5th. And you can definitely hang with us there. We cover 5 high-risk findings, and we do a little bit more of the interaction like this. And hopefully you guys liked the StreamYard format. We were able to actually make the event, I think, easier to find. Let me know if you had an easy time finding it. And if you liked it, we may be going to that format for the 5-day EKG challenge. Anyway, you guys, thanks for hanging out with me, spending the evening. I will definitely see you guys later, and have a wonderful night. Bye!